They thought she was just a fragile old woman, lost, slow, and harmless. But when the gang closed in, she smiled. And what happened next left an entire diner speechless and 6 bikers shaking. The sun hung low over the highway, baking the asphalt until it shimmered like liquid. Dust spiraled in lazy twisters across the desert stretch, clinging to tires and boots alike. The only sign of life for miles was a battered little diner crouched beside the road, its flickering neon sign spelling out din, the E long since burned out. A fly buzzed against the window. Inside, the air was still and thick with the smell of grease, coffee, and something faintly metallic. A waitress in pink sneakers refilled a sugar jar behind the counter. The old woman sat alone at the booth by the window, a half-empty coffee cup cradled in her wrinkled hands, her wooden cane resting beside her seat. The silence shattered with the growl of engines. 6 bikes thundered into the lot, the sound rolling over the sand like thunder. One after another they screeched to a halt in front of the diner, engines cutting off in angry stutters. The gang dismounted, leather, boots, sunglasses, chains. Big men with bad tempers, tattoos like battle scars. They swaggered toward the door, laughing too loud and spitting into the dirt like they owned it. The leader, broad, bald, chin like a fist, thumped the door open with one palm. Everyone inside froze. The old woman didn't even look up. He stepped through first, eyes scanning the room with the confidence of someone used to taking what he wants. A few of the others followed, brushing past booths, knocking a napkin holder to the floor just because. Their jackets bore a snarling wolf, painted in red, teeth bared at the moon. "Place smells like retirement," one of them snorted. Another snickered. "Perfect. Maybe we'll get lucky and someone croaks right at our feet." They didn't see her yet. Not really. Just a hunched figure in a floral dress. No threat. Not worth their attention. The bell above the door jingled as the last one stepped in. Dust settled behind them like smoke. Only then did the woman look up. Just for a moment. A flick of her eyes. Then she went back to her coffee. It was enough. The leader paused, something unsettled flickering in the back of his mind. He couldn't place it. A feeling. Like the first drop of rain before a storm you didn't see coming. He shoved it down. "Yo," he barked, nodding toward the booth. "Hey, lady, that seat taken?" No answer. He took a step closer, the sound of his boots against the tile sharp and slow. "You deaf or just rude?" Still nothing. She stirred her coffee gently. A silver ring caught the sunlight, flashing like a blade. That was the moment it began, the quiet shift in the room, the pause in conversation, the unspoken understanding that something wasn't right, but the gang didn't notice. Not yet. Outside, the wind began to pick up, tugging at the edges of the neon sign until it creaked on its rusted hinge. Inside, the old woman took a sip of her coffee and smiled. The door swung open again, this time harder, slamming against the wall with a sharp bang that made the waitress flinch. One of the younger bikers, lean and wiry, with a patchy beard and mirrored shades, swaggered forward. His voice cracked through the diner like a snapped branch. "Move, Granny. You're blocking the whole damn aisle." The old woman didn't flinch, didn't blink. She was standing now, slowly, one hand on her cane, the other adjusting the strap of her faded purse. Her movements were unhurried, like she had all the time in the world, like the biker's voice hadn't even registered. She turned slightly, just enough to glance his way, eyes calm and unreadable. "I'll move when I'm ready, son." Her voice wasn't loud, wasn't harsh, but something about the way it floated through the room made the hairs rise on the back of his neck. The biker scoffed. "Jesus, what is this? A freaking nursing home?" He waved a dismissive hand at the others. "Look at her. Ain't she adorable? Someone get this sweet old lady a walker." Laughter erupted from the gang behind him. They spread out, fanning into a loose semicircle around her. The big one, Rex, leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching with a smirk. The waitress retreated behind the kitchen door. Nobody wanted to be part of this. Not anymore. The old woman stepped to the side, finally clearing the path, but not before giving the young biker a long, quiet look. Not a glare, not defiant, just patient. Like a teacher waiting for a student to realize he's missed the point entirely. He didn't. He puffed out his chest and brushed past her, bumping her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble slightly, except she didn't. She pivoted with the contact, controlled, deliberate. The tip of her cane tapped once against the floor to steady her. She looked up at him again. "I hope your mother taught you better than that," she said, soft as sugar and twice as cold. He turned around, grinning. "What was that, Grandma? You got something to say?" A few of the gang whistled. One clapped slowly. Another reached over and flipped the open sign to closed, laughing under his breath. The diner felt smaller now. The walls closer. Time stretched like rubber about to snap. The air held its breath. The old woman didn't answer. She stepped forward, slow and measured, her cane ticking against the floor like a metronome. The biker's smile faltered just slightly as she stopped inches from his boots. Her eyes met his through the tint of his sunglasses. Then she looked past him, to the leader, to Rex, and smiled again. This time, it was different. Not amused, not kind. Something beneath it shimmered, like a secret, or a memory of something sharp and unforgiving. Rex straightened up, his arms unfolding. The smirk was gone. His gut told him something was off. Not in the room, in her. The others didn't feel it yet, but they would. She stood still for a moment, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, thumbs brushing over the smooth surface of a delicate pearl necklace, the kind you'd expect to see on someone's grandmother at church, or maybe on an old photograph tucked into a dusty album. Her fingers lingered on one of the pearls, turning it slowly, thoughtfully, as if it held a story no one else could hear. The gang had started to lose interest. A couple of them had moved toward the booths, scanning the menu as if they might actually order something. One perched on a stool, drumming his fingers on the counter. But the younger one, Shiv they called him, was still standing a little too close, still riding the high of mockery, waiting for a reason to puff his chest again. She tapped her cane once, then twice. A hollow, rhythmic sound against the old tile. Shiv smirked. "That's supposed to mean something, Grandma? Morse code? Or just trying to find the beat?" She turned toward him, pearl necklace still in one hand, and smiled. It wasn't the kind of smile that invited warmth. It didn't soften her features or bring any light to her eyes. It was tight, practiced, and utterly calm. The kind of smile someone gives when they know exactly how this ends, and no, you don't. Shiv shifted slightly. Just a subtle movement. But she noticed. "I always find it interesting," she said softly, "how the loudest boys are the ones most afraid of silence." The words hung there, light as feathers, but sharp as glass. Another biker let out a laugh, the kind meant to cut tension but only managed to stretch it thinner. What, she's a poet now? Rex, still standing near the counter, watched her more closely now. He wasn't smiling anymore. His jaw was tight. His instincts were talking again, quietly, but with urgency. Something about this woman didn't add up. The cane, the floral dress, the perfect pearls. It felt like a costume. And underneath it, he couldn't tell yet, but it wasn't frailty. She let go of the necklace and took a slow step forward. Her cane tapped again, steady, intentional. Her movements had no tremble, no fear. She walked like someone who had walked through worse places and seen worse men. Shiv stepped back instinctively. The old woman stopped and tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching the late afternoon light like strands of steel. "You boys play at being wolves," she said, her voice low and even. "But you've never met a real one." Something about that line twisted in Rex's gut, a memory he couldn't quite place. A story, maybe, an old rumor. The others kept smirking, kept pretending they weren't unsettled, but Rex was already starting to wish they'd picked a different place. She smiled again, not sweet, not afraid, and for the first time, someone, not everyone, just one, finally understood. It was a warning. Rex stepped forward, slow and deliberate, the floor creaking beneath his boots. The others made space for him like they always did. Respect, fear, both earned in blood and time. His presence filled the room in a way none of the younger punks could manage, and he knew it. He didn't need to shout, didn't need to posture. When Rex moved, people watched. He sized her up, floral dress, pearls, a cane that looked like it had seen a few decades too many. She was small, thin, no armor to her, no bark, no bluff, just calm, steady. And that smile, still there, like she knew something the rest of them didn't. He didn't like it. "All right, enough of the games," he said, his voice low, gravelly, from years of smoke and rage. "This isn't your living room. You're holding up my boys, and we've got miles to cover." She looked up at him slowly, her gaze landing square on his chest before trailing up to meet his eyes. Her expression never wavered. No fear, no flinch, just quiet, curious amusement. "I wasn't aware you boys were in such a hurry," she said softly. "You've been standing here a while now, doing a whole lot of nothing." A couple of the younger ones snorted. One elbowed the other. "She got you there, boss." Rex didn't look back. His eyes stayed locked on hers. Something about that stare. It wasn't confrontational. It wasn't defensive. It was older, deeper, like she'd stared down worse men in worse places and never once blinked. It wasn't even hate behind those eyes. It was measurement. He took another step closer until they were barely a foot apart. He was twice her size, shoulders thick under his leather vest, the crimson wolf's patch stretched across his back. The emblem, a blood-red wolf howling at a jagged moon, was stitched into every one of their jackets, a symbol of violence, loyalty, and bad decisions. She didn't even glance at it. "You ever heard of us, lady?" he asked, voice dropping half a tone. "The Crimson Wolves?" "I've heard of a lot of things," she replied, "some real, some made up, stories told by boys to make themselves sound bigger than they are." Someone choked on their coffee. Another let out a low whistle. Rex didn't flinch, but something cold crawled down his spine. It wasn't the words. It was the way she said them. Like the name meant nothing to her, like he meant nothing. "I don't know who you think you are," he said slowly, "but this ain't a place to get clever. You're a guest here." Her eyes flicked toward the window, where the gang's bikes sat lined like a row of iron horses under the fading sun. Then back to him. "No," she said, almost gently. "You are." And for the first time, in a very long time, Rex wasn't sure if he was still in control. The air inside the diner thickened, as if the desert heat had seeped through the walls and turned into pressure. Rex stood silent, his jaw tight, trying to calculate whether this woman was just crazy or dangerous. Behind him, the rest of the wolves waited, amused, restless. They didn't feel it yet, not like he did. Not yet. She tilted her head, the corners of her mouth pulling upward, not into a grin, but something deeper, something patient. Her gaze swept across the gang like a breeze that somehow felt like a blade. You really have no idea, do you? Her voice was soft, no louder than a whisper, but it cut through the tension like a scalpel. Shiv let out a short laugh, too loud, too forced. Lady, you keep talking like you're some kind of witch. You got a crystal ball in that purse or what? She ignored him. She only had eyes for Rex now, and the room rearranged itself around that tension, like gravity shifting. You walk in here like wolves, she said, leather and noise and teeth you've never had to use. But you don't see the traps you trip. You never look down, do you? Rex's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? You walk into a place like this, she continued, thinking it's just another pit stop, another chance to flex, to bark. You think people move because you tell them to. She reached out and tapped her cane once against the floor, punctuating each word like a metronome. You think wrong. One of the wolves shifted uncomfortably. The guy with the spiderweb tattoo on his neck reached for the toothpick in his mouth and flicked it onto the floor, like that somehow reclaimed control. Listen, lady, Rex said. You've said your piece. Now sit down before you really piss someone off. She took a step forward. Just one. And the diner seemed to hold its breath again. You're angry, she said gently, but not at me. That's the sad part. You don't even know what you're trying to prove anymore. You just bark because you forgot how to speak. Rex clenched his fists. The gang behind him didn't laugh this time. No wisecracks, no scoffing, just a stillness, a slow realization curling in their guts that something was off, very off. Shiv started to say something, probably another joke, but Rex shot him a look, one he hadn't used in years. The kind that said, shut up now, or get hurt later. The old woman didn't move. She just watched them, measured them. And with that same calm voice, she added, I've seen men like you before, loud, quick to act, slow to think. Most of them never made it past the first mistake. And what mistake is that? Rex asked. She leaned slightly on her cane, eyes gleaming beneath her silver lashes. Assuming I was ever in your way. The diner had gone still, not the calm kind of stillness. This was heavier, like the moment just before lightning splits the sky. Rex felt it. Shiv felt it. Even the kid chewing gum behind the counter paused mid-chew, eyes flicking nervously between the gang and the old woman. Something was building, coiling, ready to strike. The old woman's hand gripped the cane a little tighter. She looked down at it, like someone glancing at an old friend, and then, so fast the movement almost didn't register, click. A sound too clean, too sharp for wood. The cane split. A hidden mechanism hissed as the top half slid away from the bottom, revealing a gleaming blade nestled inside the wooden shaft. Thin, precise, beautiful. The steel caught the overhead light and threw it into Shiv's face like a slap. He stumbled back a step, eyes wide. What the? The waitress behind the counter dropped a tray. It clattered to the ground, the crash of ceramic breaking the silence like glass shattering in a church. No one breathed. No one moved. The old woman held the blade like it was part of her arm. No hesitation, no tremble. Her fingers curled around the hilt with a familiarity none of them could explain. Not a flourish, not a show. Command. Shiv reached for the knife at his belt, but Rex's voice snapped like a whip. Don't. The old woman's eyes hadn't left him. The blade remained low, non-threatening in theory, but none of them believed it for a second. Her stance had changed, subtly. Her weight shifted. Her spine straightened. That softness they had mocked was gone, peeled back like a mask that had done its job. And what lay underneath was not someone fragile. It was someone forged. She stepped forward, the blade whispering through the air. I didn't come here for trouble, she said, calm as ever. I came for pie. But if you insist on being foolish, I can accommodate." A cough broke the silence. No one laughed. Not this time. The youngest of the gang, Tommy, barely out of his teens, probably hadn't even seen a real fight, was pale, hands half raised without realizing it. "You're bluffing," Shiv muttered. "That thing's probably decorative." She raised the blade just enough to catch the light again, turning it slowly, deliberately. The steel glinted along its edge like the smile of a predator. "You think I'd carry decoration through a life like mine?" Her voice never rose, and that only made it worse. She didn't shout, she didn't plead, she warned, and this time they listened. Rex didn't mean to flinch, but he did. It was barely noticeable, just a subtle twitch of the shoulder, a breath caught halfway up his throat, as the tip of the old woman's blade came to rest less than an inch from his skin. Cold metal hovered over the pulse at his neck, steady as a surgeon's hand, unwavering. She hadn't lunged, hadn't threatened. She'd simply moved. One smooth step forward, one flick of her wrist, and now the air between them crackled like a downed power line. The diner was silent, frozen in disbelief. Somewhere near the kitchen, the waitress clutched the doorframe, her eyes wide, breath held. Rex stared down at the woman, heart pounding, but not from rage, from recognition. This wasn't adrenaline, it was survival. Raw, primal, immediate. The part of him that had seen violence before, real violence, knew what he was looking at now. And it wasn't some fluke, wasn't luck or coincidence. It was skill, intent. She had placed that blade at his throat with precision and purpose. She could have ended him, but she didn't. Not yet. He didn't dare move. Her eyes met his, calm, endless, and utterly without mercy. "You think just because I'm old, I'm weak?" she whispered. Her breath was warm against his jaw. Her voice, low and deliberate, sank into the bones of the room. It wasn't angry. It wasn't performative. It was intimate and terrifying. "That's the mistake every fool makes," she continued, voice softer still. "And that mistake," she leaned in, blade unmoving, "is usually their last." The tip kissed his skin, not enough to cut, just enough to promise. Behind him, the wolves shifted uneasily. Shiv's hand hovered near his waist again, but Rex snapped his fingers without looking. A single crack of command. Shiv froze. So did the others. Because Rex knew. He didn't know who she was. Not yet. But he knew killers. Had seen enough of them behind bars and on blood-slick pavement. The real ones didn't shout. They didn't gloat. They didn't warn. Unless they meant it. He raised both hands slowly, palms out, fingers wide. A gesture of peace, of retreat. His jaw tightened, shame flaring in his chest, but instinct overrode pride. Smart men lived. Dumb men got eulogies. The woman watched him for another long second. Then, slowly, she withdrew the blade. The movement was elegant, practiced. She stepped back, sliding the steel back into her cane with a soft click. It was the sound of the world exhaling. She patted Rex's cheek gently, almost kindly, the way a grandmother might soothe a frightened child after scolding him. "Good boy," she said, and turned her back to him without a second thought. No one moved. No one spoke. Because they'd all felt it. That invisible line she'd drawn. The edge they'd danced on. And they knew now. They were one move away from regret. The silence didn't last. It never did with men like them. The moment she turned her back, blade sheathed, steps measured, Shiv's ego kicked in like a reflex. His pride burned hotter than his fear, and in that flicker of foolishness, he made the worst decision of his life. He lunged, Fast, wild, a flash of steel in his hand, aiming for her exposed back. A blade barely longer than his palm, but sharp enough to do damage if it landed. It didn't. She pivoted with grace that defied age, her cane sweeping upward to deflect his wrist. The knife spun out of his grip before his body caught up with the fact that he'd already lost. Her other hand, still gloved and calm, slapped him across the temple with the butt of the cane. Not a dramatic swing, just efficient, cold, calculated. He crumpled onto a booth bench, gasping, eyes wide and wet with pain. The room didn't have time to process. Another one, Tank, the largest of the wolves, the one who always said he could break a door with his shoulder, roared like a freight train and charged. No blade, just brute force and fury. She let him come. At the last second, her stance shifted. One leg stepped slightly to the side. Her cane dipped, caught his knee mid-step, and redirected his momentum. Tank tripped forward, slammed against the table, and crashed through it shoulder first. A cloud of splinters and dust exploded as he landed with a thud, groaning, his bulk sprawled across the wreckage. She never stopped moving. She turned, flowing between the booths like smoke, blade drawn again, tip glinting. Not a flurry, not rage, just control, like she wasn't reacting, but rehearsing. Each movement deliberate, each strike a memory relived. Another biker hesitated, knife half pulled. He looked to Rex, waited for the nod. It didn't come. Rex stood rooted, jaw clenched, sweat gathering at his brow. He was watching the same thing they were, watching a woman dismantle them like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Like it was nothing. She stepped over Tank's groaning form and leveled the blade at the next man's chest. "Still think I'm decoration?" He didn't answer. His hand slowly let go of the knife. The old woman exhaled, not tired, controlled, her breath steady, her expression unchanged. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even winded. She was just present. She turned back toward the counter, as if the chaos she'd just unleashed was a minor inconvenience, as if she were brushing dust off her shoulder. One by one, the wolves stepped back. Shoulders tense, hands shaking, eyes darting. Because she didn't just fight. She flowed, like water shaped by war, and they had no idea how deep that river ran. She leaned against the counter now, her cane resting beside her, the blade once more hidden, but its memory lingering sharp in the air. Her breath came slow and steady, not from fatigue, but from focus. Controlled, measured. The kind of breathing that comes from someone trained to stay calm long after the storm hits. The diner was a graveyard of silence and broken assumptions. Tank groaned somewhere near the ruined booth. Shiv sat slumped, his head in his hands. The others stood scattered, backs pressed against walls, hands hovering near weapons they no longer had the courage to draw. Even the waitress behind the counter hadn't moved. She stared at the old woman like she'd sprouted wings or fangs. The woman sipped her coffee. Then she spoke. "I was 22, she said, almost to herself, the first time I held a blade against a man's throat and asked him to beg." No one interrupted. "Back then," she continued, "they trained us in silence. No names, no flags, just shadows and steel. Missions that didn't exist in countries no one was supposed to be in." She looked up, eyes sweeping the room. "Men like you," she said softly. "You swagger through life thinking you've seen things, but you haven't. You've seen bar fights and prison scraps. I've seen revolutions begin with a single whisper. I've seen dictators fall because someone made the right cut in the right throat at the right time." The gang shifted uncomfortably, as if her words carried weight they didn't want to hold. "I've moved through war zones like wind," she said, voice like a lullaby soaked in venom. "I've ended men with quieter hands than yours and colder eyes. I've disappeared entire rooms and never made a sound doing it. Shiv opened his mouth, then shut it. He wasn't sure if he wanted to ask or just flee. Rex finally found his voice. "You're ex-military." She turned her head slowly, considering him. "Not exactly," she replied. "The kind of work I did doesn't have medals. It has loose ends, buried files, empty graves, and phone calls that never happened." He stared at her, trying to match her calm words with the chaos that still echoed in the room. The blade, the movements, the control, and it fit. Too well. "You have a name?" he asked quietly. She gave him a long look, then smiled. Not the warning kind, but something that felt older, sadder. "I've had a few," she said. "But the last one they gave me was Ren." She let the name hang, like the final line of a bedtime story whispered in a darkened room. None of them recognized it, but Rex did. He'd heard that name once, in a story, in a prison yard, from a man who swore he'd watched Ren walk through a compound without leaving a single footprint. A myth. A ghost. And now that ghost was drinking diner coffee with blood on her sleeve. Alive. And very real. The name sat in the air like gunpowder. Ren. It hit Rex like a cold slap, dragging memories from the bottom of his mind where he'd buried them years ago, back when survival meant listening to stories in the dark, told in hushed voices behind iron bars. Rumors, mostly. Warnings, maybe. About a woman who didn't leave witnesses. A government blade so sharp they never gave her a rank. Just a call sign and a reputation. He stared at her now, this tiny woman in a floral dress, sipping lukewarm coffee with blood drying on her wrist like it belonged there, and his gut twisted. Not from fear, not entirely, but from something older. Shame, respect, dread. A cocktail of emotions he'd never let the others see. Ren, the ghost. He remembered one story in particular, told by an ex-Intel guy with a crooked spine and twitchy hands. He said she once dismantled an entire cartel operation in Nicaragua using only a folded map and a piece of piano wire. Said she walked out alone and didn't even button her coat afterward. The way he told it, she wasn't just a person. She was a message, sent when nothing else worked. Looking at her now, Rex believed every word. "You spared me," he said finally, his voice rough around the edges. She looked over her shoulder, then back down at her cup. "You were smart enough to stop." That stung more than any insult, like being patted on the head after failing a test you never understood in the first place. Rex took a slow step forward, hands at his sides, palms open, not in surrender anymore, but something close to reverence. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "People like you disappear. You stay gone." She stirred her coffee with the handle of her spoon, casual, like they were talking about weather. "I did disappear, for a long time, but sometimes the past catches up, or sometimes—" She looked at the shattered table where Tank still groaned. "Sometimes the present needs reminding." Shiv was silent now. Everyone was. Even the broken things in the room seemed to wait. "I thought you were a myth," Rex said. She gave him a look. Not smug, not amused, just tired. "Myths don't bleed," she said, tapping her sleeve lightly where the fabric had soaked up red. "And they don't need caffeine to function before noon." A long pause. Rex nodded slowly. "You could have killed me." "I still could." The line wasn't a threat, it was a fact. And somehow, that made it worse. She stood from her stool, fixing the hem of her dress with one hand, the cane blade still sheathed in the other. "I'm not here for war," she said, "but I won't let children with teeth think they can growl at the world and call it hunting." She met Rex's eyes, and something passed between them. Old instinct to old instinct. The recognition of an alpha you'll never surpass. He looked away first. The tension hadn't left the room. It simply changed shape. The kind that settles after a storm, tears through, and everyone's still waiting for the second strike. The wolves stood quiet, broken pieces of their bravado scattered across the diner floor. Shiv nursed a welt on his cheek. Tank hadn't gotten up, and the youngest looked like he wanted to crawl back into the desert and never be seen again. Ren, no longer just the old lady in a floral dress, remained standing, her cane in hand, her eyes on Rex. The silence stretched until even the wind outside seemed to die down. Then she spoke. "I don't want your blood," she said. "I've seen enough of that to last lifetimes. But I want peace, for this town, for the people in it." She glanced at the waitress, who had barely moved since the tray shattered. Her gaze swept to the booths where regulars had once sat, now all gone, slipped out the back door or crouched out of sight. "You'll leave them alone," she continued. "No more threats, no more collections, no more trying to scare old men out of their homes or kids off their porches. This ends here." Shiv scoffed under his breath, and Rex shot him a glare that could have turned steel to ash. Ren didn't even acknowledge it. Her eyes were still on Rex. "And if it doesn't?" he asked, voice low. She stepped closer, not fast, not threatening, just certain. "Then next time," she said, "I won't be so generous." There was no bravado, no posturing, just a blade hidden in a cane, and a calm that came from surviving too many wars to bluff. Rex believed her. So did everyone else. He nodded once. A slow, solemn bow of the head. Agreement. Understanding. Truce. She gave a slight smile. Not the warning kind, not the predator's grin, but something almost human again. The edge in her had dulled for the moment. Then she walked to her table, sat down, and tapped her finger lightly on the menu. "I'll take that pie now," she said, not to Rex, but to the waitress. Her voice suddenly light again. "Apple, if it's still warm." The waitress blinked, nodded slowly, and moved like someone who'd just been released from a spell. Rex turned to the counter, pulled a crumpled 20 from his vest, set it down gently. "For the pie," he muttered. No one laughed. No one spoke. The wolves began to move, quiet now, broken in a way that had nothing to do with bruises. The gang that rolled in like thunder was now just 6 men walking carefully through a diner that no longer belonged to them. And behind them, at the corner booth, Ren sat alone again, cane resting beside her, coffee refilled, and a warm slice of apple pie sliding across the table toward her. She picked up her fork like nothing had happened, and hummed. The sun had dropped lower, casting long golden lines through the diner's dusty windows. The air was quieter now, heavy with the weight of everything unspoken. The broken table lay in jagged ruin. A forgotten knife glinted near a booth. And Ren? She was finishing the last bite of her apple pie. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin, folded it neatly beside the plate. Then she reached for her cane, rose to her feet, and adjusted the strap of her handbag with the same unshakable grace she'd had when she walked in. Nobody said a word. The waitress stood frozen near the register, her hands still trembling. The old man in the back booth, someone no one had noticed until now, slowly set down his coffee, eyes wide behind thick glasses. Ren gave them a gentle nod. Not dramatic, not ceremonious, just polite. Then she walked to the door. Each tap of her cane echoed louder than the last, like a countdown. No one dared to move. The wolves stood aside without a word, forming a path she didn't ask for, but received all the same. When she reached Rex, she paused. He didn't meet her eyes this time. She leaned slightly toward him, close enough that only he could hear. "You could still do something good," she whispered. "If you want to." Then she stepped outside into the dying light. The wind greeted her like an old friend, brushing the hem of her dress, tugging at the silver strands of her hair. The neon sign above the diner groaned again as it swayed. Din still flickered. The E was never coming back. Wren made her way across the gravel parking lot with the same unhurried ease, tapping her cane like she was counting her steps. She stopped beside the road, turned back once, not to look at the wolves, but at the diner, at the people inside, at the peace she had reclaimed. Then she continued walking. No car waited for her. No one offered a ride. She didn't need either. The wolves remained frozen for a moment longer, then silently returned to their bikes. No growls of engines, no threats, just helmets on, kickstands up, and the slow, shame-soaked retreat of men who had seen something they'd never forget. They didn't speak as they rode off, not to each other, not to anyone. The dust rose behind them, then faded into the horizon. Inside the diner, someone finally exhaled. The waitress crossed herself without realizing it, and the legend began to settle. It would pass from mouth to mouth in the months to come, from truckers to travelers, from waitresses to gas station clerks. The day a helpless old lady nearly ended 6 lives before lunch, and walked away like it was nothing at all.